The woman in my seat was wearing my favorite color. That was the first thing I noticed. Not her face, not the way she was laughing, not the fact that her hand was resting on my fiancé's shoulder like it belonged there. The color. A deep burgundy sweater I had always told Daniel made me look confident. I had bought one for my engagement dinner, and another because I loved it so much. Somehow, seeing it on another woman made the entire train car feel colder. I had arrived 3 minutes late. 3. I had spent 20 minutes fighting traffic, 6 minutes searching for the station entrance, and the last 30 seconds running down the platform with one shoe half unfastened. Our private wedding planning trip was supposed to begin that morning. Daniel had booked the 2 seats together weeks ago. He had told me, "Don't worry, Mia. I'll save your seat." And he had. Just not for me. He was standing in the aisle beside our row, smiling at the woman in my place. His intern, Clue. She looked up at me, then at Daniel, and smiled. Daniel's expression changed so fast that, for a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Mia," he said. I looked at the seat. Then I looked at him. "Whose seat is that?" He swallowed. Chloe started to stand. "You don't have to," I said. Daniel lowered his voice. "Please don't make a scene." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, because somehow, in less than 10 seconds, he had managed to make me feel like the problem. I picked up my suitcase. "Okay," I said quietly. Then I stepped back onto the platform. The doors shut. The train began moving. Daniel stood behind the glass, staring at me. And I realized something that would change my life forever. I wasn't 3 minutes late. I was 3 years too late. 3 years of defending him. 3 years of trusting him. 3 years of believing his family saw me as one of them. And 3 months before our wedding, I was finally about to discover what they had been planning for me all along. My name is Mia Bennett, and for most of my adult life, I thought love was something you proved by staying. I was wrong. Sometimes love asks you to stay. Sometimes self-respect asks you to leave. And sometimes, the moment you walk away is the moment the truth finally catches up with everyone who thought you would never find it. I met Daniel Mercer when I was 26. We were both working at a property management firm in Chicago, although I worked in operations and he worked in acquisitions. He was charming in a quiet way, not the loud, attention-grabbing kind of charming. He remembered small details. He remembered that I hated overly sweet coffee. He remembered my dad's name after hearing it once. He remembered I had an early meeting every Monday and always sent me a message on Sunday night saying, "Go easy on yourself tomorrow." When my father died 2 years later, Daniel showed up at my mother's house before I even called him. He brought groceries. He fixed a broken cabinet hinga. He sat with my younger brother, Ethan, and listened to him talk about college applications for almost an hour. My mother loved him. My brother trusted him. And I thought I had found the kind of man people wrote about in quiet love stories. The kind who didn't need to make huge promises because he made little ones and kept them. Then, 6 months after my father died, everything changed. My father had owned Bennett Hardware and Home, a modest but successful chain of 4 neighborhood stores that he had built over 27 years. He hadn't become wealthy overnight. He had worked for it. He started with one rented storefront and a folding table. By the time he passed, he owned the buildings the stores operated from, 2 small commercial properties, and a substantial savings portfolio. My father had always told us something simple. Money doesn't make you a good person. It only gives your bad habits more room. After his funeral, our attorney told me that Dad had left the controlling interest in the business to me. Not everything, but enough. 70% of the company. My mother received income from several of the properties. Ethan received a smaller trust to help with school and, eventually, a home. And I received the company because Dad had always said I understood the business the way he did. I didn't know what to do with it at first. I considered selling. Daniel told me not to. "You're not ready," he said gently. I thought he meant emotionally. "I'll help you," he added. And he did. For the first year, he helped me organize financial statements, talk to vendors, review contracts, and understand some of the commercial property side of the business. I trusted him enough that I began to rely on him. Then he proposed. It happened on a rainy evening at my apartment. There were no cameras, no fancy restaurant. He stood in the kitchen while I was making pasta. He took my hand. And he said, "I know life isn't perfect, but I want to build something with you anyway. I cried. I said yes. Our families celebrated. My mother hugged me for so long that I couldn't breathe. Ethan joked that Daniel was finally trapped. Even my Aunt Rachel, who rarely approved of anyone, said, "He seems like a decent man." At the time, I didn't realize how much those words would hurt later. Because Daniel was decent, at least when I was looking. 3 months after our engagement, he introduced me to a new employee at his firm. Chloe Reynolds, 23 years old. Smart, confident, fast-talking. She had joined Daniel's department as an intern and, according to him, was surprisingly talented. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? She was younger than me by almost a decade, and she treated Daniel like a mentor. At first, she asked me questions about the wedding. She complimented my ring. She even offered to help organize the engagement party. I thought she was sweet. Looking back, that is one of the things that embarrasses me most. How harmless I thought everything was. How often I confused politeness with trustworthiness. The first warning sign came from my brother. Ethan was studying finance at Northwestern and had a habit of noticing things I ignored. One evening, he looked at the engagement ring on my finger and said, "You know what's strange?" "What?" "Daniel has been asking a lot of questions about the company." I laughed. "He works in property acquisitions." "I know. He's trying to help me." Ethan shook his head. "That's not what I mean." "What do you mean?" He hesitated. Then he said, "He asked me about Dad's trust structure." My smile disappeared. "Why?" He said he was curious. That's ridiculous. I thought so too. We changed the subject. I told myself Ethan was being protective, maybe even jealous. He and Daniel had never been especially close. 2 weeks later, Mom called me. "Have you changed the wedding budget?" I frowned. "No." "Why?" "Daniel said you were considering moving the wedding to a private venue in Michigan." "I haven't." There was a pause. Then Mom said quietly, "He seemed very sure." I confronted Daniel that night. He looked almost offended. "I was exploring options," he said. "Without telling me?" "I wanted to surprise you." It wasn't a surprise. I was trying to reduce the cost. The explanation sounded reasonable. I let it go. That became a pattern. Something would feel strange. Daniel would offer a perfectly logical explanation, and I would choose to believe him because believing him was easier than admitting the person I loved might be changing. Then the wedding planning became more complicated. Our venue suddenly required a larger deposit. The caterer raised the estimate. The flowers cost more than expected. Every time I questioned the budget, Daniel said the same thing. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." And slowly, without noticing, I stopped handling things. He took over. He chose vendors. He spoke to the event planner. He reviewed contracts. He even began keeping the wedding folder at his office because he said it was safer there. I should have recognized how dangerous that was. Instead, I felt relieved. I was working 70-hour weeks trying to stabilize Bennett Hardware. My mother's finances had become complicated after my father's death. Ethan was trying to finish school, and Daniel kept telling me, "Let me take one thing off your plate." So I let him. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received a call from my mother's attorney. He asked, "Mia, did you authorize Daniel Mercer to speak to us regarding your estate planning?" I stared at the wall. No. There was silence. Then he said, "All right. That's important." What happened? He requested copies of several documents. I felt the first real chill. "Which documents?" "Your father's trust." "Why?" "He said you wanted him to review the terms because you're getting married." I didn't know what to say. I never asked him to do that. The attorney's voice became careful. "Then you should speak with him immediately." I did. Daniel didn't deny it. He simply looked surprised that I knew. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From losing control of the business if something happens to you." I folded my arms. "Something happens to me?" "You know what I mean." "No, Daniel. I really don't." He rubbed his forehead. "You don't understand how complicated marriage and business ownership can get." "Then explain it." He sighed. "I wanted to make sure we were protected." "They?" That one word changed the entire conversation. He stared at me. Then he said, "We're getting married, Mia." "Yes." "So what's yours is going to become our life." I remember staring at him for a very long time. Because technically, he was right. Marriage meant sharing a life. But something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. My father had built those stores brick by brick. My mother had spent decades supporting him. I had taken over because he trusted me. And Daniel was already talking like the business was a family asset. Our asset. Before we were even married. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I opened my father's old safe. Inside was a handwritten note he had left for me. I had read it many times. But that night, one sentence suddenly felt different. If someone loves you, they won't rush you into giving up your ability to say no. I sat on the floor with that note in my hand until sunrise. Still, I didn't leave Daniel. I told myself we could fix it. We had too much history, too many memories, too much love. Or what I thought was love. The wedding was 6 months away. Then Chloe started appearing everywhere. At Daniel's office, at dinner meetings, at company events, even at our apartment once, because Daniel said they had an early presentation the next morning. She stood in my kitchen wearing a white blouse. My kitchen. And she smiled at me like we were old friends. "Sorry to drop in," she said. I smiled back. New problem. Daniel didn't look uncomfortable. That should have bothered me. Instead, I noticed that Chloe knew where the wine glasses were. That detail stayed with me. She opened the cabinet without asking, pulled out 2 glasses, then stopped when she saw my expression. Daniel stepped in. "She's been here before." I nodded. "Clearly." He laughed awkwardly. "Don't overthink it." I wanted to. I wanted to believe it was nothing. And then one evening, I found an email on Daniel's laptop. I wasn't snooping. He had asked me to print a document while he was in the shower. The message subject caught my eye. Bennett Acquisition Structure. I opened it. There were 3 attachments. A valuation of Bennett hardware, a draft operating agreement, and a proposed transfer document. I stared at the screen. My name was there, but so was another. Mercer Property Group. I clicked the file. It proposed transferring several of my company's assets into a new entity, an entity Daniel controlled. I felt numb. When he came out of the bathroom, I was still sitting at his desk. He stopped. "Mia? What is this?" He looked at the screen, then at me. "That's not what you think." I stood up. "Then tell me what it is." He exhaled. "It was a contingency plan." "For what?" "For growth. You were moving my company's assets into your company. Temporarily. Without telling me. I was going to explain. When? When everything was ready." I laughed. "Ready for what?" He said nothing. I clicked another attachment. It was a projection of the company after the transfer. The controlling interest had shifted. Not officially, but structurally. My throat tightened. You were going to own part of Bennett Hardware. Not own. Manage. You were going to control it. I was going to protect it. From who? He looked at me. And for the first time, his expression wasn't warm. It was irritated. From you. The room went silent. I don't remember what happened next. I remember putting the laptop down. I remember hearing my own heartbeat. And I remember asking, "What did you just say?" He immediately softened. "You've been overwhelmed." "No." "You're emotional." "No." "You're taking everything personally." "No." Then I said the one thing he never expected. "I want you to leave." He stared at me. "Mia, tonight." He didn't. Instead, he apologized. He cried. He said he had been under pressure. He said he was scared of losing our future. He promised it would never happen again. And, against every instinct I had, I believed him. That was the last time I forgave him. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Ethan showed up at my office. He placed a folder on my desk. "Read it." I opened it. Inside were copies of several emails, all from Daniel. But there were messages to Chloe, too. The first one said, "Keep her calm until the transfer is complete." The next said, "She won't challenge it if she believes it's for the wedding." The third said, "Her family will back us if we frame it as protection." I couldn't breathe. I kept reading. Then I saw a message from Chloe. "What if she finds out before the wedding?" Daniel replied, "She won't." Another message. "After marriage, her trust terms become easier to restructure." Then Chloe asked, "And your mother?" Daniel answered, "She'll do what we need." I looked at Ethan. "What does that mean?" He shook his head. "I don't know." But I did. Or at least I thought I did. My mother's name was involved. I went straight to her house. She opened the door. One look at my face, and she said, "What happened? Did Daniel talk to you about Dad's trust?" She went pale. "Yes." "What did he say?" "He said he was concerned." "Concerned about what?" She looked away. "About the business." My heart dropped. "Mum." She started crying. I thought she had betrayed me. I thought she had chosen him. "You told him he could change the trust?" "No." "Then what did you do?" "I signed something." My entire body went cold. "What did you sign?" She covered her face. "I thought it was financial paperwork for the wedding." I closed my eyes. "Mum, I didn't know." "What did he tell you?" "He said it was a way to protect the business if you ever became sick." I sat down. Then my mother whispered something that made everything worse. Daniel wasn't the only one asking. "Who else?" She looked at me. "Chloe." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't just greed. It was a plan. A coordinated one. And somehow, I had been the final piece. Still, there was one thing I couldn't understand. Why the wedding? Why rush everything? Why involve Chloe? What did they need from me before the ceremony? I found out 5 days later. My father's estate attorney called me into his office. He placed a document in front of me. "This is the original trust." I looked at it. Then he pointed to a clause I had never noticed. "If you marry," he said, "the control provisions change only under one circumstance." What circumstance? Joint management can only be established if you voluntarily sign a separate marital business agreement. I looked up. A prenup? More complicated than that. He slid another page toward me. "This document appears to be the agreement Daniel has been preparing." My hands shook. "If you sign this before the wedding, your control over the business becomes significantly restricted." I whispered. "How restricted?" "You would still hold ownership, but you wouldn't be able to sell major assets without your spouse's approval." I stared at the page. Daniel didn't need to steal my company. He only needed to become impossible to remove from it. The wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was the final signature. Suddenly, every detail made sense. The rushed venue, the strange contracts, the transfer documents, the way Daniel kept saying, "After we're married, everything will be easier." He wasn't building a marriage. He was building a position. That night, I went home and packed a suitcase. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him. I simply waited. 3 days later, Daniel walked into the apartment with flowers. "What's this?" I asked. "A peace offering. We're not fighting." He smiled. "I know. That scared me, because it meant he thought he still had control." He came over and kissed my forehead. I stepped back. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He smiled. "You know, Chloe has really helped with the wedding planning." I almost laughed. "Has she?" "She found us a great hotel for the honeymoon." "That's nice. She has good taste." "I've noticed." He studied my face. Then he said, "We're still good?" I looked into the eyes of the man I had once wanted to grow old with. "Yes," I said. And inside my head, I added, "Just long enough for you to make one more mistake." I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell the attorney. I went silent. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to hear what people say when they think you're no longer listening. Over the next 2 weeks, I started documenting everything. Emails, contracts, phone calls, meeting dates, financial transfers. I hired an independent forensic accountant. I discovered that Daniel had already been moving small amounts of money between companies connected to Mercer Property Group. Not enough to attract attention. Enough to establish a pattern. Then we found something worse. Chloe wasn't just Daniel's intern. She was the daughter of his business partner. And that business partner had been negotiating to buy several local retail properties from Bennett Hardware. The same properties Daniel wanted moved into his company. The entire thing was connected. But I still didn't know how far it went. Then I found the answer in an unexpected place. A voicemail. It came from my mother. Her voice was shaking. "Mia, I need you to come over. I found something in the desk." I went immediately. She handed me an old envelope. Inside was a letter from my father. It had never been opened. The address was mine. The date was 8 months before his death. Dad had written, "Mia, there are people around me I don't trust. I don't want you to become suspicious of everyone, but I want you to understand something. If anyone suddenly becomes very interested in the business, don't assume they want to help. Sometimes people offer protection because they're looking for a door. I stopped reading. My mother covered her mouth. I turned the page. There was another line.